All right. Now for our favorite topic on my favorite topic on the Sports PSP podcast, babyface or heel. Now, for those who may not know what babyface heel means in wrestling terminology, babyface means good guy hero, heel means a bad guy villain, and a tweener is someone in between babyface. So I came up with a list of athletes or celebrities, and me and Champ, we're gonna decide whether they are a babyface, heel, or tweener. Now, the first person, Scottie Pippen.
Heel. I have to say he's a heel.
Okay.
The thing is, and here's why. You are one of the top 75 players of all time. And Jordan has admitted and said on record, without Scottie, I don't win championships. When you mention me, you need to mention Scottie. And he just came out in recent years on a smear campaign against Michael Jordan. They even went on a little world tour. They called it the No Bull Tour.
Let's not forget the other controversy regarding them too.
Yeah,
I
but
think you know exactly what I'm referring to.
there was a lot of controversy with that. But as far as sports is concerned, we should remember him for more. But the thing is, I mean, and we've seen reunions between him and Michael Jordan before. Him meeting up at a Bulls game back when Derrick Rose was playing. Him going in the skybox with Jordan, him hugging, singing Kumbaya, Hallelujah. So we've seen them, interact before. But for some reason, after the Last Dance, it was like he just took offense. And the thing is, nothing that they covered in the Last Dance about you wasn't true. It was true.
The 1.7 seconds in which he refused to enter the game because he wanted to take the last shot, but Phil designed it for Tony Kukoc. But it was a smart idea on Phil's part because Kukoc hit a lot of big time shots during that season, and Kukoc was a better shooter than Pippen. I can understand from Scottie's standpoint, if Michael Jordan was still on the team, would Phil have drawn that shot for Tony Kukoc? Probably not. And I understand that Scottie had a hell of a season, the 93-94 season. That's when Jordan announced his first retirement. Scottie was in the conversation for the MVP. The Chicago Bulls won 50-plus games that season. And he let down a lot of people. Not just Phil. He let down Steve Kerr, Horace Grant, and Bill Cartwright the most.
He really
let down Bill Cartwright. He wasn't even in tears. He was crying. He said, "Pip, I can't believe you let us down." And Scottie, when he mentioned it on The Last Dance, it's one of those things. I look back, but if I'm paraphrasing, but if I had the chance to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't change it.
Yeah. But like I said, it was all about these little smear campaigns to discredit. And not just him, not just Michael Jordan, but Jerry Krause as well. The late, great Jerry Krause. I mentioned this on Monday. Remember, Phil had problems with not only Jerry Krause, but he had problems with Jerry West. We need to start revisiting some things as far as history goes. Yeah. But as far as Jerry Krause and your teammates go, you just made a mockery out of them. And like I said, Jordan acknowledged, without Pippen, I don't win. Without him, you see no me. I didn't win a darn thing without Pippen. Pippen, I owe him my career because without Pippen, guess what? I'm just another scoring champion. He's acknowledged that and went into depth and told you, not just on The Last Dance. Remember when they had Jordan at 50? When Jordan was about, Jordan turned 50 years old. He did the interview with Ahmad Rashad, and he was going to be on NBA 2K as a special guest on there. He even talked about Pip then and spoke of him very, very glowingly. And spoke about how he was one of the most underrated players in the league, how he was great defensively. You know, how he was able to get them out of a jam, how he was good, how he was great, how he was able to carry that team, you know, when he was away. You know, so
It's
I
sad
mean,
though with Scottie. And then of course, remember when he was writing the book, his own book, he talked about Phil Jackson. Remember how
yeah,
he talked about Phil Jackson? Remember he accused Phil Jackson of being a racist?
yeah, he accused Phil Jackson of being, which Robert Orr came out and disputed that. He
Right.
said, yeah, Robert Orr came out and disputed that. Now, he did admit that there was some sort of language involved where he had to tell Phil, well, you have to sharpen up and read the room on certain language, because one of the, you know, all the, you know,
Yeah.
the chi and, you know, the meditation and stuff. Phil would always say, remember who your master is. And he was talking about mastering yourself. But, you know, when you have a lot of black players, you know, hearing the word master would, you know, it can come off as offensive. So
Yeah.
Robert Orr did say, he's saying, hey, I did kind of talk to Phil about, hey, you need to watch that word master, because guess what? You're around a bunch of black players. He said, but Phil was never a racist. Matter of fact, he was part of a Native American. You know, he used to hang up, he used to be a part of these Native American clans and things of that nature. Remember, when he first brought in Dennis Rodman, him and Dennis Rodman were showing off artifacts to each other from, you know, different Native American tribes that they received gifts from. So he called him a racist, and it was just a lot of things that
I do agree from the standpoint, Champ, though, that Robert Horry had to tell Phil, you got to be careful with some of the things that you said, because remember when Russ Soul, Commissioner Stern, implemented the dress code.
Yeah.
Remember Phil Jackson, the certain type of language that he used. Not going to say Phil Jackson is a racist, but the way you said it, though, you got to be really careful, though, because again, the league is predominantly black.
Yeah. You can't have a posse and you can't let the inmates run the asylum. I remember that. And look.
And again, that doesn't necessarily make him a racist, though.
Yes. I'll say this. Like I said, people think a lot of times it's black and white when it's really young and old. I've said that once before on this pod when we talked about the Allen Iverson situation when they implemented the dress code. You know, it's really young and old. You know, the old guy is always going to say, we can't let the inmates run the asylum. And I remember my father, who's a black man, saying that. He's a black man who was born in the 50s, said we can't let the inmates run the asylum. But depending on who's saying that, it's going to get the wrong type of attention, depending on who says. If Casey Jones, God rest his soul, who's the coach of the Boston Celtics back in the day, if he said that, do you think that he would have gotten the same blowback from that? Well, say we can't let the inmates run the asylum? Probably not. Do you think that? But you know, on the same out of that same mouth, he did talk about, you know, with LeBron and his quote unquote posse. You know, he did say that. So that could be misconstrued as well. So between the whole inmates running the asylum, saying remember who your master is, and you know, the whole posse situation, because we all know what that means, it could be perceived a certain way. But as far as a lot of players came out and spoke up for Phil. But between the Last Dance documentary where everybody spoke glowingly about you, you had a chance to tell your story on there as well. It wasn't just the common misconception of it was just Mike. That's the common misconception. It wasn't just Mike.
A lot of people said it. Steve Kerr, Horace Grant, B.J. Armstrong, Phil himself,
Dennis Rodman.
Dennis didn't really say that much about Scottie because he wasn't there during the time in the early 90s. He was there in the late 90s. But here's the thing with Scottie. The reason why he's looked negatively now because of the Last Dance documentary, and this was shown during the pandemic, now because of social media, now because that different generations are aware of your history, he's viewed negatively. And how he and plus he said either LeBron, who's the GOAT, LeBron or Michael Jordan. There have been times he said LeBron is the GOAT. But my thing is with Scottie, with him and Krause, it wasn't just Scottie, it was also Michael too. Michael even made fun of Jerry Krause publicly as well. Now,
Yeah.
Jerry Krause, look, I respect and appreciate what he did for me and Chicago Bulls fans by giving us pieces. As you mentioned, as he said, players don't win championships, organizations do.
Yes.
Jordan took it as offense because he felt like, wait a minute, did the organizations had to tell me I had to play, or when I had to do certain things such as the flu and all that other stuff? Michael took it as offense in terms of his approach to the game. And Krause, at times, and even you, champ, you admitted Krause's ego got a little too out of control from time to time. And I think with Krause and Michael, they miss one another. Krause realizes, yeah, organizations doing championships, but certain players you can't replace. Certain dynasties, certain teams you can't replace. And Michael, I mean, as great as he is as a basketball player, we know how he is as an executive.
Yeah.
We don't need to go any further with that because we've seen how bad he is as an executive. But back to Scottie. He's viewed negatively because he's more of a whiner and a complainer. And, you know, Scottie, you've had, and look, Scottie, it was true. It's not like it was fabricated.
It's true. And the thing is, I think a lot of other stuff outside of basketball may have affected decisions, you know, between a lot of other things. Don't do that. Between a lot of things that I can't. A lot of things that may have happened outside of basketball may have contributed to that. You know, a lot of things that may have been in his personal life may have contributed to a lot of resentment. And to see certain things happen while you're in the middle of this smear campaign, to see certain things happen, it will kind of, you know, tick me off too. You know, I'm in the middle of this smear campaign and, you know, I see people that I care about fraternizing with the enemy. So, yeah, a lot of things. And even before that, you know, the Toxic King himself. So, yeah, so you got to think about, hey, I'm not going into any details. I'm just, you know, giving summary.
You don't have to get into all the details. I know exactly what you're referring.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff may have affected that. And I get it, man. When things happen in your personal life, you get furious, and it will spiral you in places that you don't know where you're going. It will spiral you every which way but left. But when you think about, but it was even before that was even going on. It was like the No Bull tour, slandering Michael Jordan, you know, on every single platform that you ever went on, saying that him and Jordan never went out to dinner or even had a conversation, you know, outside of basketball, off the court, when, you know, everybody even saw him in the booth and know that wasn't true. And like I said, one mistake does not make you a bad basketball player. One mistake does not make you a bad basketball player, but that is indelibly etched in people's mind. And some of his criticisms of Krause was correct. Back when they didn't have Jordan, and they didn't have, back when they did not have Jordan, they had a chance to trade for another shooting guard by the name of Jeff Hornacek. He was campaigning in order to get him or either Dan Marley because they needed some help before Jordan came back. So
not just that, champ, but also too, remember the contract that Scottie signed. Because remember, Scottie came from poverty, from Arkansas, where he was at in Arkansas. And Weinsdorf told him, hey, Scottie, don't sign that contract. I think you'd be selling yourself short. And you know, Weinsdorf is very adamant. If you sign a contract and if you outperform it, he doesn't want to hear from you again. Don't come back and asking me for more money.
Yeah. And but the thing is, he told you not to sign the contract. He's like, I think you're gonna be selling yourself short on this contract, and they told him it's gonna be outmoded because they knew the television contract was coming.
Right.
They knew the television contract was coming. And it's kind of like you telling me, he's like, hey, champ, don't go outside like that, man. You know, the sky falling, a meteor's going to fall on your ass if you walk outside. And I walk out there anyway, like I'm Andy Griffin, and then the meteor hits me. Then guess what? I ain't got nobody to blame but myself. So there's a lot of self-destruction when it comes to Scottie Pippen, if you really want me to be honest with you. It has a lot of Ultimate Warrior-esque type things that went on.
But I can't blame him for that contract situation, champ, because he came from poverty, real like poverty, like he was broke. And what happens if Scottie didn't sign that contract? And what if, God forbid, he suffered an injury? Could he ever get a possibility of another contract like that again?
Well, the thing is this. Jordan and a lot of those guys, they had to gamble on themselves. People don't realize when Jordan signed his second contract, he was only making three. By the time, even though Jordan had won 3 championships, by the time he had went to play baseball, he was only making $3.5 million a year because he only signed a 7-year, $27 million contract. By the time the only time he got his big money, that being Michael Jordan, was his last 2 years when he signed 1 year, $33 million contracts. So you could take a gamble if you are willing to. But if somebody is telling you not to sign a contract, they're looking out for you. I understand that you think you can't afford to gamble on yourself, but I'm telling you, look, this contract is not a good contract. It's not a good one. I don't think you should do that. Kind of like Chris Rock saying, man, I wouldn't do that stuff if I was you. And this is the owner. This is the man that pays me. And he's telling me, hey, I do not think you should sign this contract. The television contracts is going to come up. I think you will be selling yourself short. And guess what? You signed it anyway. But, hey, and if you know the nature of the beast, then don't be surprised about what it does. If he automatically tells you, if you know what you're dealing with, and he say, look, after you sign this contract, I told you not to sign it. Don't come back trying to renegotiate, and you still doing it, and you still did it. Hey, it's on you at a certain point.
And also, let's not forget, when Scottie suffered that injury during the 96-97 season, how he came in to play for the 97-98 season. And Michael admitted that Scottie was wrong in that scenario. He felt that Scottie should have had surgery as soon as the season was over, rehab, and then get ready to go for the 97-98 year. And what Scottie was trying to do, this is what Michael said in his last dance, was trying to force management into changing his contract. And Jerry wasn't going to do that.
No, he wasn't.
Because like I said, he was adamant. And that's on Pippen on that scenario. But but heck, if someone, it's kind of hard though at first, because again, considering the circumstances Scottie came from with poverty, I could understand him signing the contract. However, if the boss, the owner or governor, however you want to use the term, because either owner or governor, if they're telling me you shouldn't sign that contract, but as time goes on, the TV deals, they're going to skyrocket, and you're going to make a hell of a lot more money. Why sabotage it?
Yes. And let's not forget, Scottie Pippen, he had the gun incident off the court. He had that little incident off the court where he had the pew-pew. Not to mention, he got upset one game and threw a chair on the court. So he did not help his case in a lot of cases. So between the Last Dance documentary, you going on this smear campaign in order to discredit Jordan after he said that you were the reason why he won. After you said, and the thing is, nobody discredits Scottie Pippen. Nobody. Remember, Amon Shumpert said the reason why Gary Payton got neutralized in that 96 NBA finals was because of Scottie Pippen. He said, man, they took Mike off Scottie Pippen and put Gary Payton. and that whole series changed right back around. I mean,
but I don't think, but Scottie, I think Scottie, the reason why he views himself a hell of a lot higher than what we view him, and I think that's his problem.
I mean, how high can you? The thing is this, and I'll use myself as an example. The thing is this. I might consider myself a great podcaster, but I will openly admit I'm not a fucking PSP. I'm a Robin. I'm not a Batman. That's how come you see me on these teams all the time. Let's just be real.
I am not calling you Robin. I mean,
I'm not a look. I am a Robin. I'm not a Batman, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's how come you see me on these different teams. That's how come you see me here. That's how come you see me with BRF and Flash. I do better when I'm on a team rather than when I'm alone. And there's nothing wrong with being a Robin.
There's nothing wrong with that. But people, Jam, they have a higher perception of themselves, and they feel like they're a lot better than what people give them credit for.
Well, the thing is, if you was able to win, if you perceived yourself as higher, then you would have won when Jordan left. And that was number one. Because you was in the best position possible in order to do so. Had an MVP season, had great players on that team. Then, you could have won when you went to Houston. Instead, you asked to be out of there. You're not even 1 year after Charles Barkley had gave up all that money so he can bring you to Houston.
Yeah,
then you go to Portland.
Yeah.
Then you go to Portland. You have a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter against my Los Angeles Lakers in a game 7, and y'all blow the lead, and the rest is history. And the only thing we remember from that series is that iconic dunk. And then the very next year you come in, you get swept. If you want to get the respect, the superstar respect, you have to do what superstars do. And like I said, there's nothing wrong. Everybody wants to be Batman until it's time to do Batman things. And ain't that wrong with being a Robin. Ain't that wrong with being on a team. Ain't that wrong with knowing your role. Dennis Rodman knew his role.
Because Dennis Rodman didn't care. That was the thing. He knew his role. He was like, all right, I'm good. And Dennis, at the end of the day, he knew he was going to get attention, not only on, but also off the court. Yeah. So it kind of helped him in that regard. But and by the way, Champ, on the Sports PSP pod, let's just say you the Rock, I'm Stone Cold. So
I'll accept that. That's cool. I like that.
Yes, you can definitely accept that. Either John Cena, The Rock, or Taker. Just give me Stone Cold for me.
I like that. I appreciate that. But yeah, ain't nothing wrong with being a Robin, man. Like I said, I like being on teams because I don't have to be as heavily reliant on myself. I don't have to be in my head overthinking everything. Guess what? You get people on your team and they put you in good positions and you put them in great positions. And guess what? Everything comes out of that. Ain't nothing wrong with being a team player. And the thing is, people acknowledge Scottie Pippen for being LeBron before LeBron. He was the first point forward that you would like to see. Originally, Scottie Pippen was supposed to be a point guard, but he was one of the first guys that we saw be a point forward.
Him and Bird, I think.
Yeah, him and Bird. When you saw him, Bird, and then after Scottie Pippen being a point forward, you saw the evolution of that being Grant Hill. Then you saw the next evolution of that being LeBron James. But the first ever point type of forward that ran the triangle offense to perfection was Scottie Pippen. So everybody acknowledges him. Everybody acknowledges him for that. I think that Scottie gets offended when people say, I think Richard Jefferson said it. He said it's time to acknowledge that Giannis may be a Scottie Pippen, not a Jordan. And I think when people say Scottie Pippen and they relate him to Robin more so than a Batman, I think he gets offended by that. But there's nothing to be offended by. You're a great player.
I think it's because of Skip Bayless. Because Skip Bayless, you know how he treats certain players. And I think that's one of the problems. No, I mean, I'm sorry, champ. I remember he has often said, Skip Bayless has been very adamant. He doesn't think Scottie Pippen is a top 50 basketball player of all time. Michael Jordan made Scottie Pippen. He always said that he said Jordan was the long ranger and Pippen at best was Tonto. But I think that's one of the reasons why Scottie feels that way, and he feels like he's higher. But look, all your peers have commended you. You're one of the greatest defenders to have ever played the game. I mean, even if you were a Robin, you were a hell of a Robin. And Michael has said it himself. I would not be where I am today if it were not for Scottie.
Yes.
They could say I won all those championships, but I didn't do it until I had Scottie. He's called you his greatest teammate ever. So I think for Scottie, it is what it is. Unfortunately, he's a heel. I can't argue. I was leaning towards tweener, but heel because of how he's been behaving the past couple of years. So, let's move on to another athlete, Cam Newton. I say tweener. The reason why I say tweener with Cam Newton, I mean, Cam does have a big mouth. Cam does have a big personality. And there are a lot of times Cam loves to say what's on his mind. And I have no problem with it. Sometimes people feel like Cam is kind of extravagant because of his outfits, the hats, the clothes that he wears and stuff like that. But Cam is relatable to a lot of these players in the NFL because, again, Cam is from Atlanta. Cam understands the types of situations, the circumstances. And Cam, he's always gotten a bad rep, from his days in college, at the University of Florida. Remember what happened that led to his departure from Florida, champ?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think he was arrested for purchasing a stolen laptop. And then after that, he leaves the team. Florida, they're going to win the national championship against my Oklahoma Sooners. He goes to Blinn Junior College, wins the national championship over there. Auburn, I mean, throughout his time in Auburn, he was a force to be reckoned with. 30 touchdowns on the air, 20 on the ground, even dealing with controversy himself because of the whole play-for-play scandal between he and his father at during his time in Auburn. I think his father, Cecil Newton, allegedly $180,000 to try to get Cam to play at Mississippi State. And then his father didn't even attend the Heisman ceremony because he didn't want to become a distraction for Cam and his son and the university. Gets drafted number 1 overall. The comments that he made with Peter King about being an entertainer and an icon. And I still remember the comments from Nolan the Rocky from Pro Football Weekly, who called him very disingenuous, has a fake smile, always knows where the cameras are and plays to them, has an enormous ego with a sense of entitlement that invites trouble. It makes him believe he is above the law, does not command respect for teammates, and will always struggle to win a locker room. And I think Cam has had a solid career in the NFL. I mean, before Andrew Luck, before some of the other quarterbacks, he became the first to throw for 4,000 yards in his rookie season, 21 touchdowns, 14 rushing TDs as well. 2015, he was the man for the Carolina Panthers, taking them to the Super Bowl, winning the league MVP. I wish Cam, after that Super Bowl, I wish Cam would have continued on with that type of success, because if he did, he would have lasted a lot longer in the NFL, and he would have had, obviously, a better chance for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Cam, I'm happy. I would say tweener because I'm happy with the success he's doing right now with ESPN, with his own podcast, 4th and 1, as well as having other guests on his show, whether it's Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, whether if it's Rich Homie, rest his soul, Rich Homie DeQuan, whether if it's Shannon Sharp, whether if it's any guest. He's had Bow Wow. He's had a lot of celebrities on his show. So I kind of had the feeling Cam had life after football. And, Cam has a big personality. Obviously, he's got the football camps. Now, sometimes with the football camps, Cam does invite some trouble with himself because he does do a lot of talking himself. We've talked about that before, champ. And let's not forget there was one incident in which the football player literally said to Cam Newton, "You ass." To which Cam Newton even confronted him, and he said, "I'm rich," which I thought it was disrespectful on the player's part because Cam Newton is a league MVP. It's accomplished, and he's taking the time to come help you, and this is how you treat him.
Yeah.
Cam sometimes gets a bad rep. I think Cam, let's not forget the comments that he made back in 2017, which caused him to lose his endorsement deal from Dannon. Do you remember the sexist comments he made about the female reporter?
Yes.
Right. So when you take all those things into consideration, I think Cam is at best a tweener. Go ahead, champ.
Babyface.
Wow.
Babyface. Just because the masses does not like you and like your personality doesn't mean you're a bad guy. I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't like my jokes on here. People probably don't like the way I make fun of myself in certain ways. People don't like the way that we joke amongst each other like we're brothers, which we are. But does that make us bad people? Hell no, it doesn't. Luke Kuechly came out, and every teammate that he had all said glowing things about him. There's been some incidents where, where they disagreed, but guess what? All of his teammates spoke highly about him, especially in that 2015 season. Remember when Luke Kuechly came out and said, yeah, he probably should have jumped on that ball, but guess what? He worked his behind off every single day, and he went to war with us every single day. Did Cam ever get a coach fired? No. Did Cam come out and say anything bad about Ron Rivera, although we knew that he was mediocre at best as a coach? No. Did he ever throw his wide receiver under the bus? Last I checked, the minute Benjamin, I forget his name, I think
Calvin Benjamin. Benjamin.
Remember Calvin Benjamin, the first thing he did when he left the team was start talking stuff about Cam.
Eli, remember he said that Eli, to which Cam Newton even had to confront him at one point.
Yeah, with his hands behind his back. Everybody know when you put your hands behind your back, you don't want to be perceived as a threat. But the thing is, reporters will try to pull everything out of their behind. He has a big personality. And I don't like the clothes he wears. What the hell does that have to do with football? Just because I look like the Mad Hatter and I dress like Blade does not mean that has anything to do with football.
Or to quote Colin Cowherd, quarterback heel.
Nobody cares about
which I still don't understand what the fuck that means. It just means probably being prototypical, being button up PC at that position because they view it on such a pedestal.
Again, nobody cares about what Colin Cowherd has to say. This is the same young man that disrespected the late, great John Taylor when he was unfortunately unalive. And guess what? The first person to go on TV and say it was gang related was Colin Cowherd. So nobody cares what he has to say. And he never apologized to Sean Taylor or the Taylor family for that comment that he made. Although it came out that Sean Taylor was out. He was out with an injury and going to see his family. Somebody broke it into his house and fired a pew-pew and hit him in his lower groin area. He never apologized. So guess what? Nobody cares what Colin Cowherd has to say. All of this stuff where I have to be buttoned up all the time and stuff like that, it's dumb. I don't get the coach fired. You didn't hear about me being a locker room menace. That $180,000 that I probably got from the University of Auburn, wherever, guess what? It's NIL right about now. That probably wouldn't even scratch the surface nowadays.
Considering nowadays how these athletes getting paid.
These guys are driving around in $2 million cars, making $8 million a year. So that wouldn't even rub nothing the wrong way now. Now I understand he got into some trouble at Florida. Okay, young man mistake, you overcome it. But guess what? He didn't get in trouble when he was in the league. The only reason why his career was cut short because of his physical style of play and because of the injuries. I understand he got I understand he got in trouble. I understand that football camp incident had happened as far as, somebody coming on the field trying to fight him. But that was another grown man in his feelings about something. And everybody came out and vouched for the story. The way that he teaches those kids is the way that they should be taught. Nobody owes you anything. Nobody came to my school. No NFL player, former league MVP came to my school and told me about anything. Nobody was coaching me. It was just me and my father. So for me to be out here, I'm not doing myself no favors. I'm doing you a favor. And that's a fact. It's kind of like Chris Berman coming on the show right now.
Oh my God. Can you imagine exactly. Chris Berman?
Exactly. So that's what that is. People can talk about Cam Newton's clothes. People can talk about his personality. But did that disrupt his locker room? Did that disrupt his play? Did that disrupt anything that he had going on? No. The whole dab when he was going through that 2015 season. Just because the masses doesn't like it doesn't mean it's wrong. There's a lot of examples in the WNBA of when the masses start catching on to what people are doing, then it gets exposed. We'll talk about that after the show. But the thing is, just because the masses...
No, we could talk about it right now, champ, because you brought this up Tuesday. A certain individual that gets constant criticism from the masses, one Angel Reese. Yes. You made a comparison between her and Shedeur Sanders. Isn't it fair to say Angel Reese and Cam Newton do have a lot of similarities? Because Angel Reese with the me bounds or the other things that she trademarks, you see Cam, and that's actually a cool thing. Some people may not like it because why? You're showboating. I mean, because they're polarizing.
Yeah, it's always polarizing to the masses until the masses expose the real. Now, if you saw my video on TikTok, you see what I'm talking about. Now the media is even catching on how big of a trash talker that Caitlin Clark is. And now they can't bring up the R word because she's not getting into it with black players.
It's white players.
So you can no longer holler the R. You can't talk about the R word.
Did you see the other night when she got poked in the eye and that led to a fight? I think it was one of her teammates even had to come to her defense, Sophia Cunningham.
Yeah, Sophia Cunningham, she necktied one of the other players. But even before that whole incident happened, her and JC was telling her, hey, you can't do that. And Caitlin Clark came out and said, I can do whatever the blank I want. And a lot of reporters have been coming out saying that because all the masses has been saying, oh, they need to protect the masses, the major news media. And these are not guys these ain't guys like Stephen A. Smith. These ain't guys like that. These are major media outlets that are saying the WNBA and the refs are not under any obligation, and that Caitlin Clark does flop. She does talk trash. She does do everything that everybody has been saying. But because she faces Angel Reese at times, and they get the jawing or some incident happens, it gets blown up into something that it isn't. It took this whole incident with Marina Mabrey and JC in order to expose everything, in order for people to say, okay, she is a trash talker. She does do this. But back to my original statement, just because and the thing is, a lot of misconceptions can be done by the masses. And just because the masses doesn't like it, that doesn't mean I'm wrong. Just because I'm brash doesn't mean I'm wrong. Just because I'm confident doesn't mean I'm wrong. Is it because, does my confidence really bother you, or does my type of confidence bother you? I mean, and that's not talking about the R word either. Does my new age confidence of knowing who I am bother you so much that you have to say, I'm cocky, I'm entitled. When I go into this weight room, onto this football field and work my tail off, why does that bother you so much? I'm not getting my coaches fired. Last I checked, Cam Newton didn't get in trouble with the law. Neither did Angel. They didn't get in trouble with the law. You didn't hear about a whole lot of stupid mess that they was doing off the field. You didn't hear them as a locker room disruptor. You didn't hear any of that when they was in Carolina. The only backlash that I really had with Cam is, when Jerry Richardson, when he was forced to sell the team, he didn't really, and I understood at the time, I do stress at the time, because Jerry Richardson, he was the one that drafted him. He was the one that drafted him, and he didn't want to go out there and speak against him, But if that was one knock that people can really say, well, they had a point, was the point that he didn't say what he had to say as far as speaking up, as far as certain issues about Jerry Richardson. But at the same time, people can look at that and say, well, Jerry, he drafted him. So, of course, he's not going to speak on that. Of course, he had a close relationship with him, and he didn't see any of that. So, of course, he's going to back him and speak up for him. They can talk about that. But as far as Cam being a disruptor, what about all those outfits that he wears? What does that have to do with anything he did on that field? What does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with anything? Does an outfit that I wear, does it play football? No, it don't. Does it get coaches fired? No, it doesn't. Does it bother teammates? No, it doesn't. So why are we focused on my outfits? Now if you really want to call him a tweener and look at some of the stuff he does off the field, as far as, the big family that he has, then you can look at that and you can say, okay, he's a tweener because of that. Because people can say that he didn't necessarily do it the quote unquote white way.
But that doesn't mean, but just because he may not do it the right type of way, that doesn't mean he's an absentee father. That doesn't mean he doesn't take care of his kids.
Exactly. So, and there's a hell of a lot of celebrities with a lot of multiple families. So let's not get it twisted. So
yeah, he ain't the only one.
He ain't the only one. So if you want to hone in on that, feel free. But as far as Cam, I call him a babyface. Look at what he does for his community. Look at what he does for the kids. Look at how he goes to these speaking engagements. Like I said, he's always embedded in his community. And like I said, he didn't get in trouble. He wasn't out there. Like I said, just because the masses doesn't like you does not mean you're wrong. And especially when you have an idiot like Bill Romanowski talking about anybody. For him to say anything about Cam Newton is flat out ridiculous, considering the trouble that he got in when he was at the Oakland Raiders.
Remember what Bill Romanowski said about Cam Newton?
Because remember, Cam Newton, he didn't go out and shake hands. He just walked off the field after the Super Bowl. And, he kept saying that Cam Newton was selfish. The game is not about you, young man, and stuff like that. He didn't say young man. He said it's not about.
But he shake Peyton Manning's hand. He shake Peyton Manning's hand, Cam.
Yeah, but he did. But that was Bill Romanowski said. The game's not about you, boy. It's about everybody. You know what I'm saying? So, and of course that started an uproar. It's like, Bill Romanowski, who the hell are you to talk about anyone?
And I'm glad you mentioned that, champ. So Tom Brady didn't shake Nick Foles' hand or Eli Manning's hand when he lost to the Super Bowl. So wait a minute. But that's the thing. And again, champ, I'm not saying it's because of race. I'm not saying it because of race. But Tom Brady didn't shake Nick Foles' hand when he lost in the Super Bowl. Neither did Eli Manning, not once but twice. But we didn't castigate Tom Brady. We didn't held that against Tom Brady. But the reason why, champ, but as you mentioned, because we talked about this with Michael Vick, it's how you want to remember people. And when you like a certain person, you remember all the great or good things that they've done rather than the bad. Yes, and indeed. I think because of the masses, a lot of them don't like Cam because he's too extravagant, he's too outspoken, outgoing, and because of that, they feel like he's not our guy. He's not humble. But just because he may not be what you want, does that mean he deserves all the heat and criticism?
No.
I mean, people have different styles, have different flavors. Like, look, Russell Wilson, he gets a lot of flack by a lot of people, but you've come to his defense. There's nothing wrong with being Captain America. There's nothing wrong with being what you are. And if that's Russell Wilson, fine, that's Russell Wilson. Only problem I've had with Russell Wilson as far as off the football field is when he says Mr. Unlimited or the Subway commercials. I never really liked that, to be honest with you. It just kind of made me cringe, but that's a story for another day. But with Cam, like you said before, Chip, it's who you like. And as long as you like that certain person, you'll do anything to protect them or say nothing but great things about them.
Exactly. Like I said, just because the masses doesn't like it doesn't mean I'm wrong. Remember, the masses, they criticized Baker Mayfield the same way. He went out there and won 2 straight division titles, nearly took the Tampa Bay Bucks to the Super Bowl. But, let them tell that they needed an adult in the room. And like I said, I use him as an example because to prove to people, this has nothing to do with the R word. It has a lot to do with how you are perceived, because for some reason, the world hates brashness for some reason. It hates confidence. The masses hate confidence. If I have a confident person in my room, that's what you need. You need somebody like that. You need somebody who can believe that they can run through a wall and you're not going to stop it, and can make you believe that. Confidence is contagious. Brashness is contagious. And when you have a teammate like that, shout out to my guy Josh, because he was one of my point guards when I was playing basketball. Although I got 5 fouls a game, he made me feel like I can at least make 2 or 3 shots. So it's contagious. It makes you feel good. If you can rally the troops around you, so what if you're brash? So what if you're confident? You have a mindset of I can do it. And if you don't have that mindset about yourself, then nobody's going to have that mentality and that mindset for you.
Mind controls the body. Mind controls the body.
Not the body controlling the mind.
Mm-hmm. Without the mind, I mean, you can't operate. No matter the skill, the talent. Without the mind. Hey. Last one. Iron Mike Tyson. I'm going to go Babyface. Now, I understand Mike Tyson, his support for President Trump, although I don't have a problem with that. That's his prerogative. And if people want to knock on him for that, stop, because The Undertaker and Kane, they've supported President Trump. And although I don't agree, but at the same time, last time I checked, Undertaker and Kane have integrity, a la other than Hulk Hogan. But that's a story for another day. But back to Mike Tyson, Babyface. Just how the way he's turned around his life now. One could argue, and I've had this conversation before with like my father, my stepfather. Imagine if Customato, Jim Jacobs were alive today. If Mike Tyson didn't have Don King, didn't have the people that he had, and if he had just Customato and Jim Jacobs, would we be having conversations about Mike Tyson as the greatest to ever do it? And young Tyson back in the 80s, he was a force to be reckoned with, the youngest heavyweight champion in the world, knocking out Trevor Burbick, knockout. But the game that was named of Mike Tyson. Of course, Robin Givens, Lord. I mean, Don King, Lord. And then Desiree Washington. Ugh. Although you and I, we've had our conversations, I don't really think he did it. I think in that situation, he didn't have the best representation. I mean, come on. Don King, it was Don King's attorney.
It was a taxes lawyer.
Right.
He had a taxes lawyer represent him in an SA case. What the hell is going on in Miami? I'm not laughing at the situation, people. But when you have a taxes lawyer,
what he had,
I'm laughing at what he had. It's kind of like going to Vietnam with a BB gun. It's not gonna work.
But as his promoter, Don King, said, only in America. And that led to Tyson's incarceration for 3 years, converted to Islam, came back and fought, won the title. November of 96, he lost to Evander Holyfield, in which Tyson was a huge favorite to win. I think he was like a 26-1 favorite. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the second match against Evander Holyfield when he bit Holyfield's ear. And, actually, Champ, believe it or not, there was actually more outrage to that than the rape situation.
Yes. And when you go back, I am a former amateur fighter, so I go back and I turn the sound down. But that's what I used to do when I was deep in the amateurs. If you go back and turn the sound down on that second fight, you see a lot of headbutts. I think you sent me that video, by the way.
Yeah,
I think you sent me that video not too long ago, about 3 months ago. Yeah, you sent me that video, and I turned, and that caused me, like I said, I used to be an amateur boxer back in the day, and I went back and turned the sound, and that's the best way to watch a fight, because when you got all that crowd noise, it influences you. When you go back and turn the sound completely down, there was a lot of headbutts, a lot of knees, a lot of stuff, and that was thrown by Evander. It wasn't necessarily thrown. And the thing was, in fairness to Tyson, before he unfortunately got hungry doing that fight, he told the ref about it.
Mills Lane,
God rest his soul. He told Mills Lane, he's hitting me, he's butting me. You see this, right? And I remember at one point he got up under. I mean, you got to think about this. I'm only 6 feet. I'm 6 feet after I take my vitamins every morning. I'm taller than Mike Tyson. Evander Holyfield is 6'2". What is your head doing under my eye? So in fairness to Tyson, it's like when you look back on that fight, you do see a lot of headbutts and a lot of little dirty, little cheap things. And Evander Holyfield was known as kind of a cheap fighter at a certain point. Although he was highly skilled, although he was great, and he had his own video game too, Evander Holyfield Real Deal Boxing on Sega. He had one too. And, he was just as bad as Mike Tyson was on Punch-Out on that game. But I digress. But, yeah, remember what happened with Hassan? I think his name was Hassan Rahman, when he fractured his skull because of the headbutt?
Yeah, how swollen his head was.
Yeah, and a portion of his head was swollen. Remember the Hassan Rahman fight? So, yeah, there was a lot of cheap things that Holyfield would do, but because Mike Tyson was, he had already gotten convicted for that SA case, there was he had the history before he ever he had the history of his childhood, and he had to walk, he really had to walk on eggshell. And let's just call a spade. Being a big part of the hip hop community during the gangster rap era wasn't really popular. Let's just call it like it is. Even being a part of hip hop when it first started, because remember, he was good friends. He used to hang out with LL Cool J. He used to be in Harlem. Used to go to Dapper Dan. Shout out to Dapper Dan. I wish I could afford one of them suits, but I digress. Hanging out with Dapper Dan, hanging out with some of the big time guys, Eric B. and Rakim, hanging out with the underground artists was not necessarily a popular thing. So a lot of, the masses looked at Mike Tyson as a villain, although he was just merely a knockout artist. So yeah, I understand why you label him as a babyface, especially at his peak. He was bigger than Michael Jordan. He was bigger than Bo Jackson.
Not just back then, champ, now, because how Tyson has in a better situation in his life right now, and I give a lot of credit to his wife, Kiki, and she has done a phenomenal job in helping Mike. Because Mike Tyson had substance abuse problems.
Yes,
he had alcohol problems, and how he was able to make a career post boxing. Whoever thought Mike Tyson of all people would do Broadway? Broadway.
Or have cartoons. Remember Mike Tyson had a cartoon on Cartoon Network?
Yes, Adult Swim. Yes, I remember that. And also, he was on the Hangover movie.
Yeah. So I understand why you would label him a babyface. I will label him a tweener because people are going to remember the SAKs. People are going to remember the bike fight. People are going to remember him in the Francis Botha fight. You know, I don't think people remember the Francis Botha fight. I used to watch all the fights with my father.
Well, when he broke
Francis Botha. What was so funny, I didn't even realize you could break somebody's arm like that. Wait a minute, he tried to break it. And he said it in the present, yeah, I tried to break his arm, so what? But, you know, Francis Botha, again, he was kind of cheap. And when you face cheap fighters, you know what I mean by cheap, for those of you who don't understand what I'm saying, when you are cheap, that means you like to take cheap shots at people. You like to sneak one in, you know, trying to squeeze an inch in on somebody. And when you're very, very cheap, you cause reactions. And that reaction may not be the best reaction that you're going to get, especially with a Mike Tyson.
Let's not forget Lennox Lewis. Remember when he said about Lennox Lewis, I'm the best ever. My defense is impregnable, and I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I want to eat his children. Praise Didi Allah. Remember when he said that?
He had the thing was, he admitted, he said, look, everything that I said was built up to this fight. I had to sell this fight. Nobody could sell a fight like Mike Tyson. And plus, he didn't have a lot of fights between that fight and Lennox Lewis. It wasn't a lot of warm-up fights. So he had to sell that fight as much as he could because people didn't believe he could win going into that fight. I remember that fight.
The Memphis
Lewis and Tyson is on. I never forget that, man. That was the first time that, hey, man, my grandma bought a big screen TV in order for us to watch that fight on. We was all sitting down at grandma's house. We was cooking. That was the best feast. That was a feast for the ages. You know, I mean, when you talk about a feast, I mean, Thanksgiving did not have anything on that year. Nana, God bless her soul, cooked ribs, pork chops. She had the fried chicken. She had the macaroni and cheese. It took 5 tables in order to fit everything that she made for that fight. That's how big it. The entire family was down there watching the big screen TV, the Lennox Lewis fight and Mike Tyson fight. That was a big fight. That was one of the last big, huge fights that we saw during that Tyson era. But I label him a tweener, man, because, you know, people are always going to remember a lot of different things about you. People are going to remember, you know, not just the cases that was in court. Remember the rage? Remember, you know, the road rage case, and also remember the Mitch Green situation.
When he
the Mitch Green situation. Remember, Steve Harvey made a joke about Mitch Green when, you know, his eye was talking like this, right? So I never forget that. He said, let's not forget when he had that little incident. You know, it was a lot of little incidents with Mike Tyson.
Do you remember the press conference between he and Lennox Lewis in New York? And then the reporter yelled, "Get him in a straitjacket," and I can't use.
And that was, look, I'm going to tell you just like this. When you have a bear,
don't poke it.
Don't poke it. Feed it melatonin. When you have a bear, feed it melatonin and honey at all times. Because the thing is, it's just like.
No, the reason why, champ, I got to be honest with you. And sometimes when I get angry or frustrated, for some reason, I watch Tyson bite Holyfield's ear. And anytime whenever I watch that video, I always ask myself, what the fuck did I get mad for? I mean, I was talking about it with my therapist the other day because, like, I still watch it to this day. And anytime when I get angry and when I see Tyson bite Holyfield's ear, I'm like, what the fuck did I get mad for? Like, all my frustrations get out the door. It's out through the roof. It's like crazy to me.
I try my best And I probably need to go see a couple of people myself because of, conditions that I may have. As you know, I'm a 2-time war veteran, but I probably need to go back to the wizard my damn self. But the thing is, I try not to let myself get that damn angry. Not anymore, at least. I don't need any more incidents in my life. So every time I get a little bit angry, I just watch the funniest shit that I can possibly find. And I can depend on all my friends, including UPSP, to send me some funny shit during the course of the day, especially those South Park videos. It's like, oh, but I start getting mad at work because information technology is a very, very frustrating job because people start asking you because people act like they're just so helpless. They act like they can't type nothing. Could you type this in for me? I'm like, okay. And you start getting mad. It's like, you don't know how to do anything. Then, you see one of those, you see a notification come up on your phone. Oh, man, one of my homeboys sent me a video. Then, lo and behold, it's you. And then, one of those Family Guy videos, one of the South Park videos with Cartman. That's how I get through my little days. But,
or Stewie when he beats the shit out of Brian.
Yeah, one of those videos.
And that is involving Mike Tyson.
Yes, it is. But the thing is, I understand why that happened with Tyson in the bike fight. Because the dirtiest thing that anybody could do to you in boxing is headbutt your behind. And trust me, like I said, I used to be an amateur fighter. I'm certified in, I'm just going to be real. I'm certified in Chinese Goju-Ryu, certified in Tansu no Muay. I did Shaolin Goju-Ryu. I trained up under Professor Gardner down here, Columbus, Georgia side to the Grandmaster. Did a lot of things. So headbutting somebody is the most thing that you could do. I understand people could say getting hit in the groin, but getting hit in the groin, it kind of sucks. But you come to, you get headbutted, you can break your nose, you can crack your skull, you can cause permanent damage with a headbutt. A headbutt, that's pure blunt force trauma, and your skull, for the most part, is thick. So you start headbutting someone, that could really cause a lot of damage. But unfortunately, people are going to remember that and say, "Hey, you went against everything you could. You went against everything." Yeah,
and also Babyface champ. Remember, we didn't mention the wrestling, how he was when, particularly in '98. Because remember, champ, you talked about it yourself. Even though Bischoff was the one and Vince perfected it, Bischoff knew he was in trouble once WWF acquired Mike Tyson.
Yeah. Man, look, like I said, I label Tyson a tweener, but I didn't live through the Muhammad Ali era. My father lived through the Muhammad Ali era. And there's still me and my father. I got to call him again tomorrow so we could go back and forth again about the Tyson and Muhammad Ali debate. But when you think about Tyson, the video game, being a knockout artist, just knocking people out, just knockout, knocking out Michael Spinks in 90 seconds.
Or that entrance.
Yeah. Let me explain something. I don't think people understand how good Michael Spinks was as a boxer. Larry Holmes was about to break Rocky Marciano's record of 49-0. Larry Holmes won 48 straight fights and had over 20 title defenses. Guess who beat him 2 times in a row? Michael Spinks. So people underestimate how good Michael Spinks was. That's how great he was. He broke one of the best world heavyweight champions of all times record when he was about to pass the great Rocky Marciano for 49-0. And I remember Larry Holmes got a lot of flack for that because you remember he said something very, very that was deemed disrespectful because he said Rocky Marciano couldn't hold my jockstrap. So, yeah, he beat Larry Holmes twice, who is one of the greatest world heavyweight champions of all time. So that's how good Michael Spinks was. So I don't think people understand how significant of that. That was probably the biggest victory of his career. Him, that, and Razor Ruddock. So, but like I said, unfortunately, people are going to remember all the out of the ring stuff. You know, the crashing his car in New Jersey. You know, the Robin Givens situation. You know, a lot of tabloids situations.
And the situation with him and Teddy Atlas.
And the situation with him and Teddy Atlas, which
you remember the story, champ?
Yes, I remember that. I remember that story about, you know, Teddy Atlas and one of his young nieces, which I'm on Teddy Atlas' side with that, but that's a whole other story for a whole.
I can't blame Teddy on that.
I don't blame Teddy on that one because, you know, you start playing with folks' families and stuff, that's gonna, especially down south, you know, so they believe in a lot of pew-pews down here. So yeah, I gotta be, but unfortunately, the bad things are gonna take the headlines. I have to label him a tweener because of that.
Right, and I was trying to tell you, champ, like you said, the masses, just because the masses may not like you, that doesn't mean everyone doesn't like you. Sometimes people are just going to pick and choose how they're going to remember people.
No, but I will say this: the funniest moment that I ever seen with Mike Tyson before we move on was the fact that he checked that reporter in Canada. That was the greatest thing I ever saw. Because, bro, you didn't have to say that. Come on, bro. Like, really? You really gonna say that after all those years? And you know, so I appreciate Mike checking him about that. So yeah, Mike, if you ever watch the Sports PSP podcast, I admire you for checking that Canadian reporter because he said something that derogatory to you. So,
and listen, I've seen Mike Tyson angry in a lot of occasions. My favorite interview is when he did on Fox on Greta Van Susteren when they asked him about the rape situation. And man, when I saw Mike Tyson's reaction with all the questions that he was answering, but I got to give a lot of credit to Mike, man, as far as turning around his life. But the only thing that my therapist or somebody probably mentioned about Mike Tyson, they don't understand why the hell he got that tattoo in his face.
That was a symbol of, you know, being a warrior and stuff like that. And sometimes you want to do something to be different. You want to do something to be different. I mean, not everybody has the courage to be. You know, when I was younger, I wanted earrings. Unfortunately, you know, back then things were different. We'll put it that way. And considering, like I told you on the show once, considering the family I come doing that wasn't that popular. So yeah, you could imagine the backlash that came with that. But yeah, so at times you want to signify I'm going into a new direction in my life. I'm going into a new chapter. And I think that was it, man. And, you know, I think it's admirable to get it right before a fight. You know, right before a fight because, you know, you already tense, you already irritable, which that's true. Fighters get irritable as hell right before a fight. So you're already tense, you're already irritable. You're trying to make sure that you don't get cut. You're taking it lightly on sparring and everything. So for you to get it right before a fight is crazy. And remember when he first got it, remember he said this isn't even halfway done. So, you know, so thank God he didn't get whatever he had left. Thank God he didn't get all of it done.
Remember when he did an interview, and shout out to our guy Brendan from the block. Please go like and subscribe to his content. Remember when Jim Gray asked him the back injury? I broke my back.
Spinal.
Yes.
I would love to do. We tried, myself and a couple of other guys. Shout out to Christopher Williams. You know, some of my old sparring partners back in the amateur days. We tried to do Mike Tyson's workout. That ain't work for us because he used to do 1,000 push-ups a day, 1,000 sit-ups a day, run 5 miles, and that was just what he did per day. That's not even including the weightlifting and stuff like that. That's not even including that. You know, he used to do 1,000 push-ups, 2,000 sit-ups, run 5 miles, and then from there, that was just the normal what he would do. Then he would spar for like 15 rounds a day. And that was just a group. It was grueling.
Yeah, man. But Tyson, he was man, but imagine him in Customato. Imagine him in Customato. That I mean, in Customato saw something in Tyson. He was gonna be a champion, which he was, and he ended up becoming the youngest heavyweight champion in the world, man. But I will say this before we move on to the next subject. I would love to do a podcast with two people other than Champ and BRF. That's Dennis Rodman and Mike Tyson. That would be my dream come true, to do a podcast with Dennis Rodman and Mike Tyson to talk about sports, basketball, boxing, women, of course, and everything else. Now, come on, you would love to do that too, Chip. Come on now.
Of course, man. Of course, of course. Especially with Dennis Rodman. Hey, man, I wish I could party with Dennis Rodman back in the heyday. So, yeah, that was, yeah.